Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's episode, we're going to be going over the merchant's tale from the Canterbury Tales. In this tale, we're going to see a man marry a woman, if women truly are faithful in the merchant's eyes, and what kind of things happen behind people's backs without them knowing. Let's dive right in and see what goes on, shall we? The prologue for the merchant's tale starts off with the merchant saying that he has been married for a little over 2 months now, and that he really doesn't care for his wife. He actually goes on to state as an example that his wife and the devil were to make a pact, she would even be able to get the better of him. He says that his wife is completely opposite of that of Griselda from the student's tale. The merchant wishes he could just be a single man again, and after saying all of this, the host asks that he could tell us a story, and the merchant says he would be glad to. And this is where the prologue for the merchant ends. The story starts off with a merchant telling about a rich older knight named January. He is 60 years old and he's had a great life being a wonderful knight. Throughout his 60 years, he has been unmarried and single. He gets it into his head one day that he wants to marry and fulfill God's promise and his role in life. That is, that he should be married and have a son, and that way God can smile upon him. He gathers a bunch of his friends together and tells him exactly what he's going to be doing and what he's looking for. He tells his friends that he wants a wife, but that he will not settle for just anyone to be his wife. He's looking for someone that is no older than 30 years old. He says this because he thinks that someone older than this will have ulterior motives and will be too set in their ways to be a good wife, whereas someone younger will be able to still bear children to him, and he would be able to help mold her and shape her into a great wife. One of his friends says this really is a stupid idea because women are so unfaithful to begin with, that they are likely to cheat and to look at other men specifically, especially if they're younger than him. January says nonsense, and then it goes on to give a big spiel about the importance of sanctity of marriage and how right it is. He says that though he is old and his physical features are old as well, he's still very young at heart and still very green in love. January and his friends begin to look for a suitable wife for him. Finally, after some searching, he finds the one woman who steals his heart, and her name is May. After January finds her, he then calls a meeting with all of his friends to tell him of the news. When hearing this news, Justinian is not happy with it. He goes on to make a speech about how January thinks wedded life is going to be so blissful, but January really should be careful because his wife could be the earthly purgatory that God gave him, and so that way his soul can go to heaven. After hearing this outburst from Justinius, January is still convinced that he's going to marry May. So, without further fighting, everyone gets everything ready and they all prepare for the wedding. On the wedding day, January is very excited, and when he sees May coming in, she looks so beautiful, as if Sarah or Rebecca from the Bible beautiful. The priest goes on through all the rituals and they are ceremoniously married. After this, they have a nice lavish reception with many great instruments and food. The merchant then goes on to say that January looks upon May and is completely enraptured by her looks. He also states that January cannot wait until the party is over. That way he can fulfill his husbandly duties and please her on many levels. The merchant then also talks of a young squire called Damien who has worked for January for a long period of time, and how Damien also is in love with May. As the party is winding down, January gets his friends to clear the castle out so he may go to bed with his wife. The friends all agree, and promptly everyone from their castle exits and goes home happily. The priest blesses the bed before they get into it. The merchant then goes on to describe that January fully and passionately makes love to his wife all night, and in the morning when the break of day comes, he finally stops and gets some rest. January is fully infatuated with his wife and is fully in love with her. She, however, not so thoroughly impressed with him, but she keeps that to herself. The merchant then jumps back to Damien and how he hasn't been feeling well since the wedding because of his love-struckness. The merchant says that Damien writes out a poem of all of his love that he has for May, and he folds it up and puts it into a purse close to his heart under his shirt. The next day goes by and January and May are sitting in the hall feasting. January then quickly realizes that he has not seen Damien for quite some time. The other squires who were there tell him that he is sick and has stayed in bed. January tells his wife that she should go to his bedchamber and go visit him and make sure he feels better, and comfort him, and to also tell him that he will come by and visit him as well in due time. May agrees, and shortly after she goes to the chambers with her chambermaids, and she tries to cheer him up and give Damien kind words and thoughts. While she's doing this, he quickly slips the note from his purse into her bosom. After a little while later, May goes back to her husband, who is sitting in bed waiting for her. He asks her to take off her clothes so that he may once again enjoy each other's company. They both enjoy each other's company for the afternoon, and once they are finished, she gets back and puts her clothes on, and she goes away into a smaller room to read the note Damien had written for her. After she reads this note, she immediately tears it up into little pieces and throws it away. Not long after she reads the note, she realizes that she actually reciprocates the same feelings for Damien. She quickly writes a letter to him and goes to his room and slips it under his pillow for him to read. The merchant then jumps back to January and how he is completely full of bliss, still in love with his wife, and how he wants to make sure that his dwelling place is fully furnished. It even talks about a great garden that had been constructed and all of its beauty. The king was so in love with the garden that he actually had it locked away, and the only person who had a key for this garden was January himself. The merchant also says that the garden was so nice and lovely that January and May would do things there that were meant for the bedroom, but they did them in the garden. The merchant goes on to say that very soon after this, January goes completely blind. And January, being in fear that his wife will cheat on him, makes her hold his hand at all times to make sure she's right beside him. This upsets May because she fully fell in love with Damien, and under these new conditions, she was never able to see him. This also caused Damien great distress because he could not get any time with May as well. The author also gives the audience the information that May has had a mold made of the king's key for the garden, and that she had a key for herself. It's also stated that Damien had a copy of a key to get into the garden himself, and that's where they often would meet up. One day, January gets up and he has it in his mind that he wants to go with May into the garden and enjoy the day. May finds this alarming because she already told Damien to sneakily go into the garden and wait for her there so that the two can play together. Damien is able to get into the garden unseen and unhurt and crouches beneath a bush to wait for her. January and May make their way to the garden and lock the doors behind them. He tells his wife they are in the garden and that he wants to make sure that because she's been such a great and honorable wife that he gives her everything he could think of. He tells her that when they were wedded, they were joined together, and that he knows he's getting older and will possibly die soon. So he's going to make sure that everything that he owns is given to her. During this conversation, May looks over and can see Damien underneath the bush. Their eyes meet, and she gives him a signal to climb a pear tree. He does, and after this, January and May begin to roam around the gardens. The merchant then shifts over to Pluto and his wife, who are sitting in the garden nearby. The two of them have witnessed everything going on, and Pluto decides he's going to give January his sight back, so that way he can see all the terrible things May is doing behind his back. Pluto's wife says that men are so lecherous that if Pluto does give January his sight back, she will give May a really credible excuse for her actions. The merchant then shifts back to January and May, and they make it to the pear tree that Damien is sitting in. She tells January that she really wants a pear, or else she will just die. January says that unfortunately he doesn't have a squire nearby who can get one down for her, to which May says that's not a problem. If he can help her up, she will get inside the tree and grab one herself. January agrees, and she gets on top of his back and climbs up to the tree where Damien is waiting for her. Once she is in the tree, Damien and May begin to have sex. Upon this, Pluto instantly gives the sight back to January, where he is immediately filled with anger at what he sees. And just like Pluto's wife says, she gives May a great excuse for her action. She tells January that what he saw was not actually what he saw. She akins it to more of like when someone wakes up from a really deep sleep and how they can't trust the first thing they see, and that it takes about a day or two for their sight to fully come back and make proper sense of what's happening. January believes her, and she climbs down out of the tree and he embraces her, and they go back to the castle. This is where the merchant's tale ends. In a small epilogue after the merchant's tale, the host says that he wishes to stay away from women like May and all their trickery. He goes on to say that he is married to a woman who is somewhat of a shrew and a gossip. After, he says that he immediately regrets it and says, please don't tell her, please don't tell my wife. He's like, these things somehow end up finding their way back to her, so let's just keep it between us. This is where the merchant's tale ends and the epilogue ends. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay lit.